December 1st, 2020 McMinnville City Council, and I will call our meeting to order this evening. I will ask for a roll call. So Claudia, could you do a roll call of councilors?
Councillor Drapkin.
Present.
Councillor Garvin.
Here.
Councillor Geary.
Here, here.
Councillor Stassens. Is she still not on? Councillor Peralta.
Here.
Council President Minke.
Here.
And Mayor Hill.
Here. Thank you, Claudia, for that roll call. We have a quorum. And so this evening, we are going to have one of our public hearings to consider Ordinance 5098, an ordinance that will amend the city comprehensive plan map by adding 862.4 gross acres or 662.4 gross buildable acres to the urban growth boundary, which we will refer to as the UGB. Assigned a new comprehensive plan map designation to all land within the city's UGB, amend the comprehensive plan, policies, goals, procedure, amend the comprehensive plan, policies, goals, protocols, and amend the McMinnville Municipal Code Section 17, the zoning ordinance. The City Council is considering this proposal as a response to a remand order from the Land Conservation and Development Commission and the Court of Appeals for the McMinnville Growth Management and Urbanization Plan that the City of McMinnville Council adopted in 2003. Since this is a response to the remand for a project that was initially started in 1994, the City Council is considering one final set of issues associated with this project, which will be the subject of the public hearing tonight. I want to thank everyone who has joined this public hearing for their participation. Oregon Land's use goal number 1 is citizen participation. The intent of that goal is to provide an opportunity for citizens to participate in land use decision-making process. However, land use decisions are a legal decision impacting real property, and the City of McMinnville and the City of McMinnville Council are held to rigorous statutory and local requirements about how to make land use decisions so that the decisions and process are transparent and fair for all. The City Council must make their decision based upon the federal, state, local regulations governing the project at the time that it was submitted. All decisions must have legal findings based on whether or not the land use proposal meets the criteria of the Oregon state laws, the McMinnville City Code, and in this case, the decision of the Oregon Court of Appeals. Number 1, all testimony in the hearing must be considered with the Oregon state laws, the McMinnville Comprehensive Plan, and the Court of Appeals decision in mind as provided in the staff report and proposal. The City Council's decision must be in compliance with these regulations, and the City Council must adopt findings that demonstrate how their decision is in compliance with these regulations. Number 2, the failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements, evidence, or solutions sufficient to afford the City Council an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes the ability to object to the City Council's decision of the Department of Land Conservation and Development. Number 3, the order of procedure for tonight's hearing are set out in detail in the city code. In brief, we will start with a staff report. Next, the public will be asked to provide testimony. I will ask everyone who signed up in advance to testify, first in order of how they signed up. Then I will ask anyone present at Civic Hall who would like to testify, and then I would ask anyone who is on our Zoom meeting who has not testified who would like to testify to do so. After people testify, counselors may pose questions to the mayor to be asked by persons who testified or staff to clarify any information that was conveyed in the testimony. Number 4, once the City Council has heard from everyone after the 3 nights of scheduled public testimony, the City Council is satisfied that all of the information it needs to render a decision, the City Council will then close the public hearing, deliberate among themselves, and announce the decision. Since this is a periodic review work task issued by the Department of Land Conservation and Development in 1994, the final decision of the City Council will be reviewed by DLCD staff, and people who participated in the public hearing process can provide their objections to the City Council's decision, and that needs to go to the Department of Land Conservation and Development at that time. We wish to hear from everyone who wants to testify. However, we request that you refrain from repeating testimony already given by someone else. If you agree with what someone before you have said, but want to ensure that you have the legal standing in the public record, provide your testimony indicating that you concur with what has previously been said. Outside of staff, public testimony will be limited to 5 minutes. We will time the testimony and provide you with visual warnings when there is 1 minute remaining. Please be sure to keep your testimony relevant to the appropriate state, local regulations that govern growth planning. This is a legal process for considering a land use decision. We need you to state your name and address for the public record so that we can receive a written notice of the City Council's final decisions. Now, tonight's public hearing is for ordinance number 5098, docket number G 6-20, adopting the McMinnville Growth Management and Urbanization Plan that will be amended the city's UGB, the comprehensive plan map, a comprehensive plan, and the McMinnville Municipal Code relative to planning and zoning. The City Council is considering the recommendation of city staff of a remand of the city's original McMinnville Growth Management and Urbanization Plan that was adopted in 2003. This 2003 plan was adopted after a significant amount of community input and public hearing with the McMinnville Urban Area Management Commission, the McMinnville Planning Commission, and the McMinnville City Council. I will now open the public hearing. The public hearing is open. Does anyone wish to object to the jurisdiction of the City Council to hear this matter? Seeing none, does any counselor wish to make any disclosure or abstain from participating or voting on this application? Does any counselor need to declare any conflict with any other party involved in this hearing or any other sources of information outside of staff regarding the subject of this hearing? Okay, I just make note for the record that Councilor Stassens is with us now. And so will the staff please give their presentation of the proposal?
So good evening, Mayor and Councilors. My name is Heather Richards. I'm the Planning Director for the City of McMinnville. I'll be presenting tonight with DJ Heffernan, who is our project for this project that we're bringing to you. We have been presenting to you on this for the past year now, so you will see some repetition in the slides, and we apologize in advance for that. We do need to enter the information into the record tonight as part of the public hearing. We're going to do our best to make this expeditious as we can, given the amount of information we need to enter. We did deliver to you, I guess, about 600 pages, more or less, of documents that is part of the public record and your consideration for this, and our presentation is going to try to summarize that at the high level. I want to let everyone know who's online and watching that the slides for this presentation are available on our project website. And there are videos there as well that explain them if we go too quickly tonight and somebody wants more information, or they are always welcome to call one of us at the planning team as well. I've been talking about this with you for a couple of years now, and I've been remiss in not giving some credit to the team that's put this together for you. I'm just the front person for this, but the hard work is really happening behind the scenes with our internal planning team, and to deliver a product to you like this with just an internal team is fairly remarkable. So I'm really proud of what they did. I just want to recognize them really quickly. DJ Heffernan did lead the process for us. I called him up and asked him to come out of retirement. He's done many of these around the state and said, wouldn't you like to help McMinnville get theirs across the finish line? So he agreed to help us. Tom Schauer, our senior planner, was the master of GIS and all the maps that you have in your proposal. Chuck Darnell and Jamie Fleckenstein worked on all the study area findings that you have in your proposal as well, and drafted most of the work that you see. Sarah Sullivan was sort of the backbone of everything that we did, and then our legal team was led by Spencer Parsons with Amanda supporting him. So I appreciate all the work that they've done to bring this to you. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you. Okay, so we are calling this Growing McMinnville Mindfully. We do think it's important that that we all recognize this has been very thoughtfully put together, and it's been an effort over 20-some plus years. And so there's two teams that have worked on this, the previous planning team and then the planning team today that I just described to you. What we're doing is just bringing their effort across the finish line. So I want to make sure that to recognize that the past planning team really put together the bulk of this work that's in front of you. We do have a project website for this called www.growingmcminnvillemindfully.com. That has the legal record on it. There's 1,700 pages of legal record to this, and it has all the updated documents as well. And then as we get public testimony in, we are posting it as we get it every night, the night that we receive the testimony. So that is there too for people to find. There's videos of all of our presentations regarding this project if people want to go and get some backstory as well. So the ordinance, you're considering an ordinance tonight, and the ordinance you're considering does 5 separate things. It adopts the McMinnville Growth Management and Urbanization Plan as part of the comprehensive plan. It adds land to the McMinnville Urban Growth Boundary, which we call the UGB. It assigns comprehensive plan designations to land that's in the UGB. So it's land that's already in the UGB, and then the land that's proposed to come into the UGB. It adopts and or amends selected comprehensive plan goals, policies, and proposals. And then it amends Section 17 of the McMinnville Municipal Code, which we call the zoning ordinance. So the plan itself was first put together and adopted by the city in 2003, and it has 7 appendixes. It's had 6 appendixes originally, and we've added one, which is Appendix G. And so we are moving all these appendixes forward. Some of them have been amended as part of this work based on the direction of the Court of Appeals and their remand decision. The McMinnville Growth Management Urbanization Plan started in 1994 as a periodic review work task. So the state tells cities that they need to go into these periodic review efforts, and they describe what the city needs to be working on. And in this case, it was commercial land inventory and a potential UGB expansion. In 1995, the City Council appointed a task force to put together a McMinnville 2020 plan, vision for the community. What would the community look like in McMinnville in 2020? And then in 2001, 2002, the city staff went back out into the community and did some refinement forums in terms of that McMinnville 2020 vision to see if it was still pertained in terms of putting this plan together. And then this plan was the result of that work. There are 7 guiding principles in the plan, and we are carrying those forward, and they are: the guiding principles for the proposal that you see in front of you tonight. One is to comply with Oregon land use law. Two is to respect the existing land use and development patterns that are in the city and build from them. Three is to avoid development in areas of known hazards or natural resources. Four is to consider the physical and topographic boundaries that surround McMinnville in terms of the cost of providing urban service. So that's infrastructure, water, wastewater, roads, to new development. Five is is a density policy. So it's to adopt policies that allow the market to increase densities and then also push it to do so in some cases. Six is traditional development. So that's harking back to encouraging development like we used to build cities back in the 20s and 30s, where we had a lot of walkable neighborhoods where people could access employment opportunities, commercial services where they live, so they were able to walk to them. If you think of the traditional downtowns and city centers. And then the seventh one is to contain any urban expansion, so UGB expansion, within natural and physical boundaries as much as possible. We are working on a remand from 2003. So we are held legally to the data set that's in the record, which is a 2003 data set. And it's based on a population forecast, a housing needs analysis, and an economic opportunity analysis that were established in 2001. So the planning horizon that we're talking about is 2003 to 2023. Our population forecast that we're working towards is 44,055 people. There's been a lot of confusion about that. We are 34,000 right now. So the anticipation is not that we'll get there in 2023, but that is the population forecast target that we plan for with this work. We are talking about an increase in population of 15,500 people, and that's based on what the population was in 2003, which was 28,500 people. And based on trying to accommodate 15,500 people, the city came up with an analysis that it needed 6,000 new dwelling units. It was never intended that the 6,000 new dwelling units would happen in a new UGB. The way Oregon land use law works is you try to see how much of that new housing and population you can accommodate within your existing UGB by looking at land use efficiencies and buildable land that hasn't been built out yet. So it was always intended that 9,000 of that growth population would be in the existing UGB, and that any new expansion UGB would accommodate about 6,500 people, which roughly equates out to this differential in terms of housing, the 3,500 new homes within the existing UGB and 2,500 new homes in an expanded UGB. And that's based on when this was first submitted in 2003. So the city in 2003 submitted a UGB expansion to the state, went through the process we're going through tonight, had public hearings. The city council adopted the plan, MGUP plan, and submitted a UGB expansion. It was for 881 buildable acres and 1,539 gross acres. It represented everything that's in green on this map, as well as those areas that are in pink. At that time, the state said you were allowed to bring in 259 acres into your UGB, which was 259 gross buildable acres. We will typically talk in terms of gross buildable acres because we're looking for where the city can build on in terms of identifying future growth opportunities, but there's also gross acres, and that includes a lot of land that's not buildable. So in this first round, it was 418 gross acres and 259 gross buildable acres. The state said you can bring that in. All the rest of the and that was everything that's in green that you see here. All the rest of the remaining land that you see in pink was challenged by opponents who said you didn't do city, you cannot bring this in because you did not follow the law in terms of how you did your analysis to decide what lands to bring in. And so there's a lot of people who I've been talking to over the last couple of weeks after we sent out notices who live in Riverside South over here in this area, or up here at Fox Ridge Road, or over here in Redmond Hill Road. They received notices because they're going to be part of a comp plan designation change, but they are already in the UGB today based on this action that took place in 2003. However, there was still outstanding land needs. So we said we needed 881 buildable acres. We got 259 buildable acres. We still had outstanding land need to meet our future housing, employment, and livability for that targeted population of 44,055 people. And in Oregon, cities have to show how they're going to accommodate 20 years of population growth. So the city kept working at this, and we resubmitted another plan in 2005. That plan was approved by the state DLCD, just like that's going to be the next step of this effort. It was then appealed. It went to LCDC, which is the Land Conservation Development Commission, and it went up and down through the system. Court of Appeals was appealed by opponents and eventually made its way back down to the city in 2012. When the Court of Appeals made a decision in 2011 to remand it back to LCDC, the Land Conservation Development Commission, and said, you approved something the city put together, but we feel you didn't do all the work the right way and it needs to be redone, some issues. And then the state said, well, we're going to push that back down to the city and say, city, this remand goes back down to you, and this is what the court said. So in 2013, when it came back to the city passed an ordinance, Ordinance 4961, where it said we're going to walk away for a while on this project. We're not going to close the door on it, but we're going to walk away for a while. We've put a lot of resources into this. It's been challenged for a long time, and we need some time away. So the Court of Appeals determination, this is very important because all that time going up and down through the chain with challenges, everything was getting resolved over the years. And we came down to 3 assignments of error that the petitioner submitted 3 assignments of error to the Court of Appeals. One was how we selected the land, one was the amount of park land needed, and one was the amount of high density residential land needed. The court outright rejected the 2nd and 3rd assignment of error without further discussion. So they said, we do not see any issues with that. The remand was down to the one remaining assignment of error, which is the first one, which was the selection of land for the UGB. And that's what this work is tonight. So in January of this year, City Council directed staff to evaluate responding to that last piece of the 2012 remand for this 2003 project. And what that means is we're working in a sandbox of all the laws that existed in 2003 and the data set that was part of this project. So the UGB proposal, what ordinance number 5098 does is it bring new land into the city's urban growth boundary. One of the things that is the proposal, and this is what the map is that we're recommending to you for new land into the UGB. Everything that is in green here is part of that proposal. It equates to 662.40 gross buildable acres and 862 gross acres. Another part of the ordinance, though, is to change all the comprehensive plan designations for all the land that's in the UGB. So that land that already had come into the UGB in 2003, these pieces here, here, and here, and over here are still in the UGB. They have never annexed into the city. And so part of the ordinance is changing the comprehensive plan designation for those properties to what we call urban holding. Right now, they have a comprehensive plan designation of residential on them. And we have those throughout the city as well. And we feel that urban holding is a better comprehensive plan designation for these properties. And I'll walk you through why as we go through the presentation. We're also recommending that the urban holding comprehensive plan designation be applied to new property coming into the UGB. And then we have a floodplain comprehensive plan designation, industrial and commercial. And so this right here shows the comprehensive plan designation and what that action will take on the different amount of gross acres in the city's entire UGB, phase 1 and phase 2. We do talk about this in phase 1 and phase 2 because this is all meant to achieve that needed land for the population target of 44,055 people. 259 acres came in 2003, and we're working on the remaining part of that. So the proposal we're bringing to you as a total with phase 1 and phase 2 combined is 921.5 2.4 gross buildable acres. This will serve a future population of 44,055 people. It will house approximately 2,500 dwelling units. So those are the homes that we said were not going to be part of the existing UGB, but would be in this new UGB, the phase 1 and phase 2. 254 acres of parkland, 106 acres of employment land, and 121 acres of other public and semi-public uses. So how and why did we end up with this boundary and this recommendation to you? We really, based on the direction of the Court of Appeals decision, they put a roadmap together that we needed to follow for this UGB analysis. So the one assignment of error left is how do you select the land? And the Court of Appeals put together a roadmap for that. There are essentially 3 steps in that roadmap. One is to determine the land need. One is that step 2 is then to determine what candidate lands are adequate to serve that land need. And then step 3 is to determine what candidate lands which are considered adequate are now suitable to serve that land need. So the land need itself was established already in the previous work, and it's in Appendix B with the buildable lands analysis. It's based on that 2001 housing needs analysis. It's based on a 2001 economic opportunities analysis, and then the 2001 buildable lands inventory that was amended in January 2003. And so essentially it came up with this as a land need in terms of housing, parks, schools, government, commercial, and industrial. I'd like to point out there's 106 acres of commercial land need, and there's considered 46 acres of surplus industrial land. There's been a couple of amendments to this. One happened with City Council in 2004 based on a challenge to the amount of parkland need that was described in this. And so City Council subtracted 60 acres from the 314 acres of parkland need. That action took place in 2004. And then with this proposal we're bringing to you tonight, we're recommending to add 81 acres to the housing land need because there was a conservation easement that was recorded in 2008 on 81 acres of land in the city limits that's designated for residential development. And the easement says there will be no development on this property in perpetuity. So essentially took it off the buildable lands inventory. And this shows where that conservation easement is for Shegwin Farms, and then how it impacts the city's buildable lands inventory with 81 acres that wraps right around here. So with those 2 changes, we now are looking at 618 gross buildable acres for housing, 254 gross buildable acres for parks. What's interesting to know about McMinnville is that our residential comp plan designation that we talked about has all of these elements in it: housing, parks, schools, religious, government facilities. A lot of communities will have a park zone, they'll have a school zone, and a park comp plan designation, a school comp plan designation. We have it all under residential, which is good. It allows for flexibility, but it also is tough in terms of making sure that we're achieving all these different land needs. But in terms of the overall land need for our residential need, it's 1,043 acres. And this is what's coming out of the Appendix A and Appendix B of the plan. We then are, by Oregon law, the city needs to then look at land use efficiency. So how can you look at what's happening inside the existing UGB in such a way that you can encourage more land use efficiencies and density to occur? Cities need to do that work. And based on the work done in 2003, the city adopted a land use efficiency that equated to about 225 acres of housing need that would be absorbed in the city's existing UGB, which then amends this number up here and subtracts the 225 from it. So that leaves us with 818 acres that we're looking for. Then we have the phase 1 UGB amendment. So our overall need, when you include the 818 and the commercial land need, was 924 acres for the entire UGB to serve this growth management plan. And then phase 1 came forward in 2003, and we had 259 acres there. So we subtract that from our overall land need, and we have a revised total of 665 acres, and that's phase 2. So this is the need that we're currently serving in terms of this UGB proposal. Excuse me. So now I'm going to turn it over to DJ. He's going to talk you through step 2 and step 3 of the roadmap from the Court of Appeals.
Thanks, Heather. So with the land needs set, we know how much land we need to look for outside of the existing UGB. We set out to determine for candidate lands, how much of it was adequate to meet urban land needs, and of those that are deemed adequate, what areas were most suitable to address the land needs that Heather just reviewed with you that have been identified. So we started out with asking the question, what's buildable? We drew a 1-mile boundary, and all of these things that I'm going through here with you are outlined in state law or in state rule. So we started out with a 1-mile perimeter, and then we started subtracting land that was not buildable. So this map shows floodplain. Next slide. The stuff that's in red is land that has slopes of greater than 25%. That's considered not buildable, so we removed that. Next slide. And then we looked at land that had already been developed, the stuff that's in orange. It's considered developed. That where Heather's cursor is right there is the sewage treatment plant, so that's dedicated to that use. So all of the stuff in orange is already built and developed, so it was not considered buildable land. And so once we had identified the buildable land, we then identified study areas. We broke those buildable lands up. And these study areas on this map, you're seeing what the soil classifications of those properties are. Red is class 1 soils. They are very productive farmland, and green and yellow are considered lower quality soils. Those are class 3 and above. And so our job was then to analyze these study areas. And so the next slide shows what all of them look like in a slightly different color. And it also shows the priorities. So the green areas that you see on this slide are exception areas. I won't define that for you, just know that those are the highest priority area for bringing into the urban growth boundary. The yellow areas are areas that have predominantly class 3 and 3, 4 and higher soils. And the red areas are the lowest priority for including in the urban growth boundary. Those are areas with predominantly class 1 and 2 soils. So we set out to analyze these study areas in this priority sequence. Next slide. And we did that using 5 factors that are outlined in the state goal 14, the urbanization goal by state law. And within each of those factors, since there's 5 of them and the definitions for them are pretty general, we added a bunch of criteria for which we could objectively evaluate the pros and cons and how well each area performed under these different criteria. And when you added them all up, there were probably 25 or 30 different data points for all of these that we evaluated. And we evaluated them, next slide, using a 3-point system. An area that scored well under a criteria for its suitability or its adequacy to be urbanized received a 3, and if it was really cruddy, it received a 1. And so we did this for, next slide, all of the study areas. We prepared a report. Each study area has a separate report that evaluated all of the land it was inside of it. And next slide, it evaluated all of these criteria. And just keep advancing, Heather. There's just a lot of data here. And we used all of that data and we prepared separate reports for each of those study areas and then used that to make these determinations. So step 2 starts with the determination of adequacy. We used factor 5 and factor 7 and the criteria in those associated with those factors to determine adequacy. And if the study area couldn't achieve an average score of 1.5 or greater out of the 3-point scale that we were using, it was deemed to be inadequate. It just didn't pass muster or pass a high enough threshold to be considered to be included. After we determined that, made that adequacy determination, we also looked at adequacy under another set of definitions for ORS 197, 0.3, A, B, and C. And I've highlighted factor C, which is maximum efficiency of land within the urban growth boundary requires inclusion of lower priority lands in order to serve higher priority lands. This becomes important later on, and I'll explain why. So after we had made the adequacy determination, we went to step 3, which is to determine the suitability of the candidate areas, all of those study areas. Next slide. And we did that in sequential order. We used all of the location factors. They're listed here, public facilities. In addition to 5 and 7, we also looked at 3, 4, and 6. And we looked at and we evaluated all of these areas and compared them to determine which ones were most suitable. Next slide. So we did that starting with the exception lands and then going to the resource lands in priority order with class 4 through class 1 soils. Next slide. So starting with the exception lands, that's all right. Here's a picture showing the exception areas that were green from the earlier map that I showed you. And the 3 areas that are circled here are recommended to be included in the urban growth boundary. They were deemed adequate and they were deemed suitable for urbanization. The other areas that are not circled were deemed either inadequate or they were unsuitable to be urbanized because there were other areas that met needs better than they did. So the table that you see on this slide is where we made an adjustment to the land needs. So you can see over on the right where it says remaining need, we subtracted the buildable acreage for the different types of land needs that we had and kept a running tally of what our remaining need was. Next slide. So after analyzing the exception areas, we moved to the resource land, beginning with the higher priority resource lands that are in yellow here. And again, the ones that are circled are recommended to be included in the urban growth boundaries. The others were either inadequate or unsuitable. I've got an arrow pointing at West Hills South for a reason, and it's the one that triggers that 197, 298.3C. It merits special attention because of the consequences of considering that part of law. In order to extend services to West Hills South, the sewer lines, because of the way this area drain, that are to the southeast of it, east and southeast of it, have to be included in the urban growth boundary. So next slide. This is a quick map showing the green dashed lines that are the conceptual sewer lines. They all drain to the southeast, as you can see. And those areas had to be included in order to get sewers up to West Hills South, up in the top corner. And you can kind of see the way the drainage goes. I also want to point out on this map, the blue line at the south edge of Southwest 06 that Heather is highlighting right now, that's Cosine Creek. And that kind of became our southern boundary because of the way the sewers work relative to that drainage basin. Next slide. So because of that, we had a bigger adjustment than just the capacity that West Hills South could serve. We also had available capacity in all of these other areas that had to be included. And when we factored all of that in and added it all up, next slide, we met our need. We had nothing, we had nothing else to compare. So we never really needed to go on to other class 1 and 2 soil areas. We were essentially done at this point in terms of meeting our unmet land need. Next slide. So that's how we went about doing this. It was very technical. It was very objective. Every area was treated the same. There's probably, I'm guessing, close to 500 hours of staff time that went into doing this. And so that's how we ended up with the recommendation that Heather showed you at the beginning. Here it is again. So this recommendation for how much land comes into the urban growth boundary is just the start. Next, we have to lay out a pathway for those areas to become urbanized and to develop. And so Heather's going to review that now.
Yeah, and I apologize, my computer is jumping around on the slide, so I'm trying to control it. So in terms of, we've talked you through the Appendix A, B, and C. So we talked about the population target, the land need, and the alternatives analysis, how we selected the land. Now, the rest of Appendixes D, E, F, and G are the implementation methodology. So how to achieve what the city wants to achieve on those lands. So this is the UGB phase 1 and phase 2 in total. So it includes the 2003 lands that came in and then the proposed lands for this effort. Because all of this land is serving the McMinnville Growth Management and Urbanization Plan. And so in terms of, we have 818 acres, which are considered residential, but that 818 acres includes all these other uses as well. And one of the things the petitioner said in their petition to the Court of Appeals is that the city, how is the city going to ensure that it's meeting all of its different needs within this residential zone? We don't want to see the city become a sprawling housing development. We want to make sure it's achieving all the livability needs as well. And so we did add one appendix to the overall plan, Appendix G. And Appendix G is sort of the high-level planning for the whole urban growth boundary lands, including phase 1 and phase 2. And it describes how to achieve all those different needs. So it talks about neighborhood activity centers are a big piece of the McMinnville Growth Management Urbanization Plan. It identifies where those can locate, where high density residential could locate on a very conceptual level. This is like the 30,000 foot level. And then what are some different opportunities for view sheds and parks and greenways and things of that nature? So our recommendation is to use that framework plan and adopt it as part of this effort, and then go into an area planning process. And the area planning process would then look at different areas in the framework plan and take it down to the 10,000 foot level. And this is done with the community and the property owners. So it's a long range planning process. Everyone gets together and talks about how do we want this area to develop to meet the land need that we've described. And I think that this would serve McMinnville really well, especially after what we've heard from the different developments that are happening up here, where a lot of people feel that they aren't coherent and really creating a sense of community. What this would do is it would allow us as a city to say, this is how we want this area to develop. The community is part of that discussion. The city adopts the area plans. And then when the property owner wants to annex into the city, they need to provide a master plan and show how they're meeting that adopted area plan. Any property owner with property over 10 acres will need to show that master plan as part of their annexation agreement, and then go through a land use process for the master plan. The city will initiate the area planning efforts, and we've described in Appendix G the order in which we think that should go. These two up here, I think, can invert on themselves, because I do think this area is going to take a lot longer to develop based on the infrastructure needs here that need to be designed. And so this area might be ready to go a little bit sooner. So if property owners get together and say, we'd like to do this area first, we can look at that. We've also set up a pathway in the plan where property owners themselves can initiate the area planning if they're able to go before the city in terms of resources. Appendix G also has narrative that summarizes the land needs that are in Appendix A and B that we're building this UGB amendment based upon. And so it talks about the high density residential zoning that we're trying to achieve in this area. It talks about the parkland that we're trying to achieve in this area, and the school land, and then the remaining housing land. Now, it's important to remember that this is for both phase 1 and phase 2. And so we are looking to locate these parks in the whole UGB. not just in the phase 2 portion of it. So Appendix F is your actual legal comprehensive plan map amendment, and that is the action that amends and brings this property into the city's UGB and then assigns these different comprehensive plan designations to all the land within the existing UGB, both phase 1 and phase 2. Appendix E is zoning ordinance amendments, where we introduce how, the objective criteria and how a developer will get through the process in terms of the area master planning process, so what is required of them. It introduces a new high-density residential zone, an R5 zone, and then it introduces a neighborhood activity center overlay. Appendix D is all of the amendments to the comprehensive plan policies, goals, and proposals. The McMinnville comprehensive plan has goals and it has policies to meet those goals. And then it has this unique tool called proposals, which is adopted commitments that the city makes that we're going to work on these efforts to meet these policies and goals in the future. And so we did add several proposals to this based on what we had read in the record was the opponent's objections to some of the elements that the city had said they would do, but didn't have a commitment to doing it. So there are a couple of proposals under natural resources, which is to develop, adopt, and maintain a natural hazards inventory. We learned a lot about hazards in this area as we were going through this work. And then to develop and adopt a natural hazards overlay zone to help protect development in the hazardous areas. In the housing chapter, we delete the policies about west side density. That's a antiquated policy that limits density on the west side due to infrastructure constraints, and those constraints no longer exist in terms of wastewater. And then it adds this policy for high density residential zone. Under facilities and services, we recommend updating every facility plan, trying to update them every 5 years, but especially following any major UGB amendments. So you really should be updating your public facility plans after you do a major UGB amendment, because you're updating the sanitary plan and the water plan and the parks plan in terms of how you're serving that whole new UGB as well as the existing UGB. And then in urbanization, we add policies about the MGMUP guiding principles, the comprehensive plan designations, including the new one that we're recommending, which is urban holding, the whole framework plan, area plan, and master plan process. And then we have several proposals in there. One is this commitment to area planning to do as a city for this new UGB land. One is to establish a park zone to ensure that that land that's set aside for parks remains in a park zone and remains as a public park facility for the community to enjoy. We are recommending developing an open space and natural resource comp plan map designation and a zone map designation. This is for the 81 acres of the Shegwin Farms conservation easement to keep that in this open space natural resource designation. And then there is in the recommendation to you, there is a land use efficiency we're recommending, which is to rezone 40 acres of industrial lands on Highway 18 on some of the frontage, southern frontage of Highway 18, from industrial to commercial, and then bringing in the Riverside North exception area, 40 acres there to accommodate the industrial land needs. And in that way, we're saving the city from going into 40 acres of resource land. So there's a lot of discussion about what does this mean in terms of impact to the rural areas in Yamhill County. So we did some calculations on that. Exception areas, which is the first area that we're meant to look at and bring into the city as a UGB, is also ironically area that's developed. And so oftentimes there's less buildable land in those areas. It's preserving farm and forest land, but it's less efficient in terms of overall unbuildable land. So 46% of the exception areas is unbuildable. That's why we end up with more gross acres than buildable acres. And then the resource areas, 23% of that is unbuildable. In terms of impact to the county lands, this McMinnville UGB amendment, both phase 1 and phase 2, the total 921 gross buildable acres, which is 1,280 gross acres, is about 0.2% of Yamhill County's acreage overall. So that's how much land would be urbanized in this UGB. And then the McMinnville UGB amendment, both phase 1 and phase 2. I didn't calculate this just for phase 2. I should have done that. It will be a little bit less. But the McMinnville UGB amendment for the full 921 gross buildable acres, in terms of urbanizing EFU land, which is exclusive farm use land, it's 0.4% of the existing Yamhill County exclusive farm use land. So it's a very minimal impact on that, which is good to see. 44% of the overall UGB is exception areas, and then this describes how much is in the different class soils. We're surrounded mostly by class 2 soils, but we were able to keep that amount down to 28% with this proposal. In terms of public engagement with COVID, it was a little difficult, but we tried to get out and talk to people through different types of Zoom events. We visited with service clubs. We offered 5 different public information sessions on different dates during different times where we went through a presentation like this and answered questions and encouraged people to participate in the public hearing. We've set up as a city 3 consecutive nights of public hearings to make sure there's time for people to participate and for you, City Council, to hear them. And then Yamhill County has set up the City Council will go through their public hearing deliberations first. It then goes to Yamhill County Board of Commissioners. They have scheduled their public hearing for December 10th. And then after it goes through those 2 processes, if both entities adopt it, it will go to the state. In terms of public notices, we did mail public notices out to impacted property owners in phase 1. So those property owners who are already in the UGB, but would have a comprehensive plan designation change from residential to urban holding. There are 105 properties that are impacted that way that all got mailing. We sent out mailings to impacted property owners in phase 2. There's 65 properties. Those are the people who own property that's recommended for inclusion in the UGB. And then we sent out mailings to properties within 300 feet of impacted properties, and there were 700 properties that were part of that. We published the notices talked about the public hearing and also provided maps. Our first notice, we heard back from people that the maps were difficult to read, and we understand this is a very complicated project, so we sent out a second notice that had a larger singular map associated with it, 11 by 17, to try to see if we can help people understand what was being proposed. And then we published the public hearing in the News Register on the 24th, 27th, and the 1st today. Written testimony that we've received thus far, as we get it, every night we're sending you, City Council, emails with the testimony that we received that day to enter it into the public record so that these people can all get standing and you can hear and read what they want to communicate to you. This is all that we've received thus far up until 5:30 p.m. today in terms of letters and emails from the community. So with that, that's the basis of our presentation. I'm sorry if we went a little bit longer than anticipated. Are there any questions from council for us?
So we'll open it up for questions to staff from council.
Mayor?
Go ahead, Remy.
I'm not actually leading with a question. I wanted to say, and I think maybe before we get into the depths of things, it's a good time to say that you mentioned at the beginning that there was a lot of repetition in the slides and there was repetition in the packet as well. And I just wanted to say that not only did I appreciate the repetition, I felt as though it really drove home highlights in it, but this entire package binder here, this is an amazing piece of work, and I just wanted to commend you and staff at the planning department. I mean, it is incredible. The work, the thoughtfulness, the clarity. I've expressed to you already, and to Tom, but the map repository I found to be phenomenal. As a very visual learner, that was a wonderful way to take that information and move it across and be able to take it in. And I have been with, I think, everybody I have talked to about what I have of course joked about the heftiness of this binder, because it's no small undertaking, but really I've always made sure to know, and I want the entire planning department to know how extremely impressed I am with the thoroughness and the clarity. And this is a tremendous amount of information to relay, and I just think it is done so exceptionally well.
Thank you, Remy, for those words. I think what we're going to do is Heather's going to keep the slides up if we have to refer back to those with questions. So I think I'll just call on each counselor to see if they have questions, because I can't see everyone at all in the same view. But I see Counselor Geary has a question. So Zach, we'll turn the floor to you.
Thank you. For brevity, I'll just echo Remy's thanks for the staff on the repeated year-long and testimony, and thanks to every counselor who came before me to push this forward. Hopefully we can push it across. I guess I don't know how far into the weeds I want my questions to go, but I'll try not to. Just to clarify one thing, that I came in thinking one thing and was just want to confirm we're going a different direction, or this direction. The comp plan changes and the zoning code changes that you have proposed in here will be made by the passage of this ordinance.
Yes. So, and we've had some discussion about that over the past year. So part of the state law and the process is that the city needs to show how it's going to implement meeting its need with for housing, employment, and livability, not just by land supply, but by other programs and regulations. And so the recommendation is that you adopt these comp plan policies and proposals as part of this effort, as well as the zoning ordinance amendments. We looked at them. They're very similar. We didn't make many changes, except for we added some proposals to the comp plan relative to what was originally discussed by the community back in 2003, and through the years, it went back and forth a little bit. The only things we added were some proposals for the new zones and comp plan designations, and then also the effort for the framework plan, area plan, and master plan.
Okay, I thought I had asked before, and it was, we weren't going to pass these as part of this. We were just going to look at them and then work on them later. But this ordinance passes these. Okay.
Yes, and I apologize for the confusion. We've had some discussion with legal counsel and then also with DLCD about the comp plan policies and zoning ordinance amendments, and our recommendation is that they do need to be passed as part of the implementation methodology.
And will this, upon passage of this, if we get there, will it take effect immediately, or is it one of those weird 30-day things?
It's an ordinance, so it takes effect in 30 days.
Okay. But the rest of the ball can get moving forward? With
no, the whole ordinance takes effect in 30 days. We will submit it to the state after it goes through the Yamhill County Board of County Commissioners.
But that doesn't have to wait for that 30 days.
Right.
Okay, cool. A couple of specifics. I need help a little understanding comp plan 68 on D5. And if that's too specific for this moment, you can tell me this is too specific for this moment. But these are my types of questions, as you may not be surprised.
That's for the mayor to decide in terms of procedure.
And I think let's go ahead. Zach, how many specific questions do you have?
How many do I get? Because I'll pick the best. Well, let me. I have like 4 or 5. Yeah, I have like 4 or 5 specific along these same lines. I can pick I'll stick with 3. How about that? Give me 3.
Let's go with 3 tonight. I would feel comfortable. I know each of the counselors go fairly detailed in our reading, but you have this background in construction and land use that may blossom out a few new questions that others may not ask.
Okay, then I'm going to choose. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was also going to suggest if there's editorial questions, you can always send that, since we have 3 nights of public hearing, you can always send that to us in an email. We can then back to the record that evening as part of the continued public hearing.
And I'm going to revise which question I'm asking if it's one of my 3. Where and how does this impact our current TSP?
So our current TSP was built on the original UGB proposal, including both the green land and the pink land. So it's already built to accommodate this targeted population. However, where the targeted population is going to be located is slightly different. There is in the original UGB, there was some land in the southwest. We added a little bit there and took it away from the 3 Mile Lane area. But our recommendation is if the UGB amendment is approved, we then go through an update of that TSP for the whole new UGB. We should be updating anyways, it's close to 10 years old. And part of this process, this analysis, we hired a third-party vendor, including a transportation engineer, to look at 2 things. Both, one would be the feasibility of providing roads to the lands that we were studying. And the second one was what would be the downstream impact of this new growth on the existing system? And that was part of our analysis that's in the study area screening.
Okay, so do you have that text in there that reads like one of those proposals in the comp plan, right? And like,
yes.
We encourage you to every 5 years or after a UGB thing, do this.
Yes.
So you have the TSP written in there as one of those proposals?
Yes. Yes, we have the wastewater.
I just feel like I didn't see the TSP listed specifically. I saw the public facilities things. So if you could either now or offline point me to exactly where that says transportation system plan updated after every UGB. That one seemed, in my time on council, as a hot button issue as we could continue to grow. So I'd like to prioritize that. And then any additional discussion around tree protection and preservation as we continue to grow into undeveloped lands? Do you have a robust preservation plan or an addendum or an even more aggressive tree preservation and protection plan in here?
No, so that type of detail would not come in at this 30,000 foot level of comp plan policies, but that could be something that we could put into our work plan. We did look at, in terms of the study area and how we evaluated them. One of the things we've been hearing in McMinnville over the last couple of years is the need to protect our natural resources that are ecosystems. And so part of our studying was looking at those areas that do provide ecosystems for protected species or species of concern. And so you'll see in our findings that there are areas that we are recommending not come into the UGB to protect those ecosystems, and they are mostly the tree. There's ecological systems associated with the copses of trees that are up on the West Hills in terms of the ridges up there. DJ might be able to answer that better than I. He's the one who did that screening.
Zach, to follow up on that, we looked at those habitat areas, but they were done at the habitat level as opposed to defining individual trees or individual tree species or individual locations for preservation. So that work would be done likely as part of the area planning process and master planning process as we drill down and get into more detail. That master planning, however, is going to need to follow whatever the city's regulatory framework is for that. So if the community feels that tree preservation is not adequately dealt with through your regulatory framework, then that would need to be modified prior to those master plans being approved. But those are steps going forward. We did not get down into that level of detail for amending the urban growth boundary.
This is Sal. I just wanted to comment on that, if I may. And Zach, I appreciate you bringing that up because that was something that flagged right at the top for me as well. And the main reason it flagged is that when I was reading through the plan, it seemed to me that most, literally on page 75, it says, in order to minimize conflict with agricultural uses, most of the development was being pushed into wooded lots. Mm-hmm. And so that really, threw the question to me, that seems to be the model here in Oregon. And without additional steps to protect those heritage trees, I feel like we're going to be in a pretty bad situation, apropos of Zach's point. So I just want to second Zach's comment there.
Yeah, and just to point out to you, and this might help both Councilor Peralta and Councilor Geary. So a new proposed policy in the comp plan on page D10, which is 182.5, that's where you find the recommendation to update the transportation system plan. But that's also where you see have a recommendation to update the Goal 5 resources plan. And that's where we would inventory historic heritage trees and things of that nature.
But I guess, and this is all still counts under the umbrella of question 2. The inventory of trees, I think, is a helpful step in the way, but I think coming up with more rigorous code language to say, when you develop these 40 acres for your 500 houses, this is how we're going to treat all of the existing heritage trees. And because we find that to be super important as the city of McMinnville grows and does it as good stewards of the land we're taking, this is how we're going to protect the trees, and this is the way in which those trees are going to be preserved, and this is the way in which we're going to make way for homes if that's what it has to come to, or we're going to incorporate those into designs. And if you have to take them down, these are the ramifications and these are the contributions you're going to give to offset the burden of developing on these heritage trees.
Right. But to be able to develop that code, you would need to actually have a comprehensive plan list of your trees that you're protecting.
Right. And so step 1 is in here, and you're saying it's not appropriate to have step 2 in here, or we just don't?
The list of trees isn't in there either. Step 1 that's in there is the proposal that the city needs to do a Goal 5 resources plan. And that's where you identify the cultural and heritage resources that you want to preserve, and that includes the landscape. And then step 3 after that is developing the code to implement the policy that's in your plan.
Councilors, I don't know if this is going to be any solace to you, but one of the things I think that's pretty interesting about the proposal is how much of it is acreage that has been farmed for a very long time and where there are no trees. I think a bigger issue in some of the planning going forward, the master planning, may be to come up with ways to put street trees in place and provide urban canopy in areas that have been devoid of any canopy for a very long time. The other point I would make is that the areas that are in riparian corridors are off limits to development, and so that habitat is already well protected by your existing plan framework.
Okay. That makes sense, DJ, thanks. Yeah, I'll cede my time, but I just think this should include more teeth and more progress towards the specific code language of when you develop a land, this is how we're going to treat the trees.
This is a land need and selection of land for land need process that we're working on right now, and that would be the next step.
Okay. Zach, does that take care of you for this evening? We're going to have 2 additional nights for you to look into it, and maybe even more.
Yep.
Okay, let's go to Sal next.
Put my video on, hopefully it'll hold up here. Thank you, Mayor. And thanks, Heather, and to you and all of your staff. I just, second all of Remy's comments. The main question that I had related to the section in the plan on page 50 related to protecting areas of communities of community importance. can you or DJ step me through how the language in that section does that? I just had a hard time following it.
So 50 of the plan itself,
Yes.
document.
It looked like it restricted the areas where R1 zoning could occur.
Yeah, so what that, and that's original language from the 2003 plan that the city adopted. So what it does is it says that the R1 land, and there's a comp plan policy that mimics this, that R1 zoning will not be placed on slope constrained lands. So those lands that have slopes on them, and we identify what's considered constrained, will not have R1 zoning.
Right. I guess my question is that it seemed to me that was the section related to protecting areas of interest, and I didn't understand the connection there.
Yeah, so that it's actually both that and the impact on land use efficiency fall underneath that header, protect areas of community importance. And so the way the plan was originally proposed in 2003 was there would be two ways of doing that. One is to protect the slopes by only having R1 zone on the slopes.
So I guess what I'm getting at is, in terms of areas of community importance, you were identifying just that one frame. Would it be appropriate to identify other areas? This is kind of following up on what Zach was asking, not necessarily apropos of the trees, but additional protections within our plan. Would this be the section where that would occur? And I guess I wonder if that little bit that's in there really meets that goal.
So this would be the section where that would occur. But again, just to remind you, our charge based on the Court of Appeals remand was not to change the principles of the plan document itself, but just how the land was selected for the UGB amendment piece of this process. So this portion of and that's why we identified in the documents themselves in green text boxes those things that were relative to this remand update, because we didn't want to change what the community had put together through the years of effort previously to get to the document that's here, that 2003 document. If we change the protected areas of community importance through this process at this hearing level, I would rely on legal counsel as to how far we can take that, because it hasn't gone through a public engagement process.
Okay. Well, let's pick that up on a subsequent night, I guess.
Okay.
Let me just see if I have any other questions that may be germane. Oh yeah. On page 33 of the plan, it references landscaping as it relates to the downtown core. Do you have a map of that area? I was looking through it. I didn't see it, or it didn't stand out to me in the appendix that was referenced for maps, and I may have just missed it. But my main question there, irrelevant of whether you have a map, does that actually change the current landscaping requirements for downtown, or is that the same basic requirements that we currently have?
The requirements that we have reflect what's in this plan.
Mm-hmm. Including the geographic area?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
But what I'm going to do, Counselor, is I'm going to write that down and bring you back an answer tomorrow night.
Okay, thanks, Heather. That's all I got for tonight.
Thank you, Sal. Let's move to Adam.
Heather, thank you for the great presentation. Your staff did a great job. I would second Zach's thoughts about the TSP plan. That's something that we've seen come up. And with developments and with most of this, or pretty much all this housing going in the Southwest sector, that's a concern I have. Another concern I would have is just that we have updated plans, which it appears that we will before we green light this property to go into development. Other than that, I would just look forward to hearing public comment and still reading through some of these emails we've gotten the last couple days and further deliberating Thursday night. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Let's go to Kelly next.
I have no questions at this time. Thank you for all the work you've done and staff and everything. It's been really, and I do agree with the repetition. It helps a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. And let's go to Wendy. Wendy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd also like to second Remy's comments. Although it is a hefty document, it is so well put together, and it has been a pleasure to review. Very, very well done. I just had one question. Heather was, and I had a nice conversation earlier, and she answered a lot of my questions, which was great. I did have another question around the framework area planning and master plan process. I know one of the struggles that we had with that Second Street neighborhood activity center was the feasibility of getting businesses to be able to thrive on that corner. And what I wanted to get just some feedback from you about how this might address, like if we had somebody that came to us that had something that didn't match what we had in an area plan or on their master plan, how would we, because of something like that, like a market reality, how would this influence that? Like, would we be able to work through some struggles like that, where our vision is this, but they're saying that's just not feasible, or like, what is it, like it's not approved unless it matches, or what does it look like if something like that happens, like what happened on 2nd Street?
So the area plans, when describing the neighborhood activity centers, and what's interesting to me is that in this plan, both in the plan document and the comp plan policy, and the zoning ordinance amendments for neighborhood activity centers, it's fairly specific about what will occur in those neighborhood activity centers, but it's also a menu list of what will occur. So the way I envision it is that the area plan will say a neighborhood activity center will be located here at the intersection of X and X. It will be this big, and then housing will look like this around it, and there will be a park of 2.5 acres associated with it. But it's not so specific that it's a 1,000-foot level plan. And so when a developer comes in and they're asked to show how they're achieving the master plan, they can come in the area plan. They can come in with a master plan that's 100,000 square feet of commercial is not going to work in this neighborhood. But what we're recommending is to do small office space, because that's where the demand is. Some neighborhood serving commercial that is, retail like this, and this. And then put the plaza here and do the housing here. So still meet the tenets of the neighborhood activity center, but they decide how that menu is going to be put together.
Okay, great.
That helps.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how special districts work in Bend, and that's how the Northwest Crossing development was put together.
Yeah, which is very effective. So thank you, Heather. That's very helpful. And that's all my questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Wendy. And I would just echo the thoughts that have been said about the materials. And I think even more impressive to me is the dialogue and the work sessions that we've done leading up to this, which makes this material much more understandable as we're going through this. And so again, I would take and like to thank current staff, and as Heather had indicated, Doug and Ron and support staff over the many years. There's a few of us that have been around for part of this, and I think the focus and getting to those elements that really build the foundation and DJ and his expertise, and the staffing's expertise has just been phenomenal. So again, thank you so very much. And we'll have opportunities tomorrow evening and Thursday evening to ask additional questions as you continue to study. And I think it's to make note right now that we have work to do after the passage of the UGB as it goes to code work and master planning, as we've talked about. But with that being said, we will now start to hear public testimony on the proposal. Our role is to listen to the public testimony and to ask clarifying questions when appropriate. Each person testifying will be allotted 5 minutes for their testimony. So we will start with people who have signed up in advance to testify. Please remember to include your name, address for the record. Claudia, who is our first person to testify this evening?
Ezra Hammer, who's on Zoom, is our first person.
Ezra, welcome. It's good to hear from you. Go ahead, give your name and your address for the record.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Honorable City Councilors. My name is Ezra Hammer. I'm with the Home Builders Association of Metropolitan Portland. Excuse me. Pleasure to be with you this evening. My address is 1555 Bangui Road in Lake Oswego. The zip is 90305. I'm going to keep my comments brief tonight. You've already had numerous presentations, and I know you're going to have hours worth of testimony over the next several days. I just want to express our sincere thanks to Heather and her team for the really thoughtful, thorough, and extensive analysis that has gone into the presentation that you saw tonight. As you heard, this has been really a decades-long process, and it's really impressive to see McMinnville coming together and working so diligently and hard to address issues which have been on the table again for decades. My organization represents the women and men who work in the home building construction industry. And I've had conversations with our counterparts in the environmental advocacy world, and they share a lot of the enthusiasm for the work that Heather's been doing tonight. And I think that's really a testament to the fact that this process, although it's been going on for many years and has been very contentious, is one that has brought a lot of different sides together. And I think the proposal before you tonight, although it's really just a framework for the future planning that you're going to do as a council to really bring these communities to fruition, it's an important first step. And so I just want to congratulate you all. I know there's a long ways to go, but at a time when politics has been so contentious, when land use is always so contentious, it is really impressive to see all the work that has been done. And again, thank Heather and her team for all of their work, and I wish you the best of luck in your deliberations. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Ezra. Any counselor have any questions? There wasn't much posed there, but any questions of Ezra? Okay, Claudia, next.
Next, we have Al Ashcroft, who's here. Yep.
Welcome, Al.
Thank you for allowing us to have input. My name is Al Ashcroft. I live at 2280 Redmond Hill Road. And just for kind of reference, Redmond Hill Road borders the proposed urban growth boundary. So my backyard will become the new urban growth boundary, which is my concern. I don't have a lot of information. I got it mostly from the News Register article recently, but there was a Dr. Megan Hurst in there, I think I pronounced her name right, that said in there, and it kind of moved me, was land use affects everything in our lives. These decisions have forever impact. And I thought, man, of all the issues that you have to consider, to be considering all of this complicated process that's going to affect our lives for a long time during a pandemic, when we're limited to how we can even convey messages. I'm 68, I'm not tech savvy. We tried to do the Zoom, couldn't do it. I tried to find out even where the urban growth boundary was and couldn't get that till today, when I went down and actually had to kind of beat on the door to get somebody to come out and tell me where the actual line was, so that I found out the urban growth boundary was in my backyard. So it's been a scramble for me to even put something together, but I would really recommend to you as a council that why do we have to do this during the pandemic? Why can't we just postpone it, a decision, until after the pandemic is done? So that would be my key thing, is we don't need to do this right now. It's like it's being pushed through right now, and it may not be, but with the pandemic the way it is, to me, it's not good. A little bit of my story on this process is I'm assuming that the city council really wants this urban growth. I don't. I like McMinnville. I moved here because I think it's a great community, and I don't want to see it get bigger. It's gotten bigger since I've moved here in the last 2 years, and the people I talk to don't like the growth that's occurring. They don't think it's been well planned out. And now that's facing me in my backyard. So the key thing for me is, sometimes I feel as a small person, you get stuff pushed down your throat and you don't get any say in the matter. If this all gets approved and I get some development in my backyard, I sure wish that we had some input or more input on what it's going to be. Like, can I maybe hope or advocate for a park in my backyard? Because right now it's a beautiful field. I came from Sheridan, where I had 10 acres and exclusive farm use. I couldn't divide that or do anything to it, and it wasn't farmland. It was river bottom land, but it was an exclusive farm use. I've got a beautiful field in the back of my property. I can see the coastal hills. And this proposal can come in and destroy that without anything for me. My value of property goes down. I've heard that we want more houses so we can lower the cost of housing. That's going to lower my cost of housing, of my house. And I'm not sure that I haven't been asked anything, any questions. I see 1,000 friends of Oregon has had a lot. Yes, sir.
One more minute, Al.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you were getting me for a question. So I guess I'm majorly concerned with the type of development that is, if it occurs on the back of my yard. There's lots of flood issues and Indian land, spiritual things going on right by my property. I wasn't thinking that this was going to happen. They told me it wasn't when I bought the property. And probably in closing, I'm kind of upset that there is no planning between Sheridan and McMinnville, Amity and McMinnville, Dayton and McMinnville. Why don't we have a giant West Valley urban growth plan that ties these communities together instead of overloading the systems that we have in each one? Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Any questions for Mr. Ashcroft? Okay. Claudia, do we have, who's our next person?
Next, we have Sid Friedman online.
Welcome, Sid.
Have I been unmuted?
You're unmuted, and so go ahead. Your name and address for the record.
For the record, Sid Friedman testifying on behalf of Friends of Yamhill County, Post Office Box 1083, McMinnville. You should have written testimony from both Friends of Yamhill County and 1,000 Friends in your packet. And I don't want to read that or, I do want to touch on a few key points. We've been involved in this process for many years, and I want to acknowledge that the proposed map expansion, the proposed comprehensive plan map amendment is a much better proposal than the one that was before the council previously. It does a much better job of protecting the best farmland around McMinnville. And I want to just reiterate that farmland is not undeveloped land just awaiting urbanization. It is already developed industrial land that supports our leading industry, agriculture. And we recognize that urbanizing farmland is sometimes necessary, but we shouldn't pretend that there is no cost to doing so. Having said that, it's a much better plan. And as your staff report points out, the success of the plan is really going to depend on the implementing plan policies and the implementing zoning ordinance amendments that are before you. Our written testimony details a few areas of concern we have where we think the actual code and plan amendments may not lead to the type of development that the city says it aspires to. First, with respect to high density and medium density housing, one of the, we've all been saying for months now or years that one of the key drivers of this amendment is the need for more housing that is more affordable to more households. The neighborhood activity center guidelines that appear in several places in the document prohibit or strongly discourage medium and high density housing when it's located more than a certain distance from the core center of the neighborhood activity center. That policy seems inconsistent with the great neighborhood principles that you've adopted that call for integrating housing types throughout the community and throughout neighborhoods, and also inconsistent with the transit supportive development that you say you're aspiring to, that the plan says it aspires to. And some 16 years ago, DLCD noted similar concerns when it reviewed those plan policies, and I put a quote from them in our written testimony. So we would recommend that you strike those specific guidelines, that no high density housing more than 1/8 of a mile from the center of the neighborhood activity center, no medium density housing more than 1/4 mile, and instead retain the text that speaks of a gradient of housing densities where your densest housing is closer to the center, and then they gradually diminish without putting those kinds of strict numerical targets in there or numerical restrictions. Also on the subject of housing affordability, we strongly support the adoption of the R5 zone, the readoption of the R5 zone. That's the exclusive multifamily zone that was repealed by the council some 7 years ago. On that note, though, both the original plan and the buildable lands analysis identified a need for 72 acres of R5 land, but the revised analysis that was just done says that half of that need has been met within the city already. We disagree for reasons stated in our written testimony. Briefly, we're concerned that the neighborhood activity center guidelines prescribe very large amounts of land for relatively little amounts of building space, especially for commercial, office, and institutional uses. That those ratios are more consistent with auto-oriented development than with compact pedestrian walkable neighborhoods. So lastly, you have a big challenge in front of you to try and get all the parkland that the plan says it aspires to. It's important that you adopt the park zone expeditiously, but also commit to not annexing land just for residential uses and without getting the requisite amount of parkland. So with that, I encourage you to read our written testimony. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Sid. Are there any clarifying questions from anything that Sid had brought up from the council?
Sid, this is Sal. I have a couple of questions, if I may, Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you. Sid, regarding the mass transit and the siting of R5 zones within a certain proximity to the transit corridors and the neighborhood centers, it seems to me that usually when I've seen multifamily residential has typically been encouraged on those corridors simply for financial and economic reasons. A lot more people using multifamily in R5 zone are dependent on mass transit and easy access to transportation corridors. Does Thousand Friends have any thoughts on that aspect of those restrictions as opposed to what you were suggesting was integrated throughout the city?
Just first to clarify, I'm speaking on behalf of Friends of Yamhill County this evening.
Sorry. Thank you.
Not a Thousand Friends. But in general, I agree with the points you were making that higher density development along transit corridors is important to support transit. Our concern is that the siting of such housing, more affordable types of housing, apartments, medium density housing, not be proscribed or prohibited or discouraged in other areas of the city if market conditions lead to them, or if in implementing the missing middle housing bill that the legislature recently passed, you find that it's appropriate to locate medium density housing or high density housing in other areas as well. Does that answer your question, Councilor Peralta?
It did. Thank you, Sid.
Any other clarifying that needs to be done from Sid's testimony? Hearing none, thank you, Sid.
Thank you,
Claudia.
Councilor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Claudia, next.
Mayor, those were all the people who had signed up to speak.
Thank you, Claudia. Is there anyone in the Civic Center, we've already heard from Mr. Ashcroft, who would like to testify on this proposal? Please indicate so by raising your hand, and then when you come up, state your name and address for the record. So anyone in the Civic Hall that would like to testify before us this evening?
No one else, Mayor.
Thank you, Claudia. Now that takes us to anyone on the Zoom meeting who wishes to testify on this proposal. Please indicate your interest by raising your hand in the participants section on the Zoom control, or by sending a chat message to Claudia indicating that you wish to testify. We will then call on you to testify. At that time, you will be unmuted, your video and show your audio and show your video for your testimony. Please remember to state your name and address for the record. So Claudia, we'll turn it over to you if anyone on the Zoom call wishes to testify. Again, it may be easier to just to go in and raise your hand in the Zoom function.
Mayor, we don't have anyone raise their hand yet.
Okay. Then, is there anyone that's on the phone wishes to testify on the proposal? If so, please mute your phone and let us know that you would like to testify. Remember to state your name and address for the record. Anyone that has called in that would like to testify this evening? Okay, I don't hear anyone. Again, I will, just for the record, one more time, ask if there's anyone that would like to testify this evening before the council in this public hearing. Please indicate.
We have Ramsey McPhillips on Zoom.
Okay, Ramsey?
Can you hear me?
We can, Ramsey. It's good to have you on the call.
Thank you. I just want to have a clarification first, Mayor. If I speak this evening, may I also speak tomorrow evening and the third evening, or are we only given 5 minutes over the course of these 3 minutes?
Yeah, 5 minute, one time before the public hearing, we'll take one testimony. So again, if you're not prepared or you'd like to wait and hear more of the proceedings, you can feel free to wait till Thursday evening to have your testimony then.
That would be best. I'll wait to hear what else is presented and spoken, and then I'll give my testimony then. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramsey.
And Mr. Mayor, I'll just chime in quickly to say that for Mr. McPhillips and other members of the public, in addition to testimony, if somebody has already testified or testifies and has something else they'd like to add after hearing other testimony, that the record is still open for written submissions as well.
Thank you, Spencer, for that legal clarification. And again, if you're not able to before us be within the 5 minutes, you can do written testimony also, and that can become a part of the record. You can put written testimony in, and you can also do a verbal testimony. Okay, that concludes our public hearing for tonight. Does the staff have anything they would like to add to the record at this time, or does City Council have any additional questions for city staff at this time?
Mr. Mayor, I have a question maybe for tomorrow night rather than for tonight, but just maybe staff can take it, which is just, I thought that Mr. Friedman's points were very well taken. And I'm wondering if, as part of tomorrow's presentation or the subsequent presentation, if staff could respond to the points that he made this evening, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, and Councilor Peralta, just for one of the points, relative to prohibition of R5 anywhere else in the city outside of a neighborhood activity center. One of your proposed comp plan policies, which is 71.12, actually explicitly says that we would like to disperse R5 housing throughout the community, and we would like to locate it. It says land zoned R5 should be located within existing or planned transit corridors. In addition, it should be dispersed throughout the community and integrated into neighborhood areas so that high density housing is not concentrated and segregated in one specific area of the city. So I think there's some confusion that the language for the neighborhood activity center, which says that R5 housing should be, for a neighborhood activity center, should be located in this sort of perimeter around the commercial development, that's the only place where it would be allowed in the city per our comp plan policies, but we actually have explicit policies that say otherwise. And then for the R4 zone, which is now going to be the medium density zone, that will be allowed anywhere in the city that has a residential comp plan designation.
To follow up on that previous explanation, sorry if I jump in the fray there, it's relative. How does comp plan policy 86 play into that too then? Just further down that same page. That was a lingering question I had. Dispersal of new multifamily housing development will be encouraged throughout the residentially designated area in the city to avoid a concentration of people, traffic congestion, and noise. The dispersal policy will not apply to areas on the fringes of the downtown core, in neighborhood activity centers, and surrounding Linfield College, where multifamily developments shall still be allowed in property designated areas.
Yeah, so I get that language too, Councilor Geary, and I'm going to go back into the record to figure out the context behind that. If that's a policy that actually discourages multiple family dispersal throughout the community, or if that's just a policy that says that I'm going to try and find out more.
That'd be helpful to me. The first time I read through it, I thought, wait, we're not allowing multifamily in the RACs at all?
In
For
the
the
NACs,
NACs?
yeah, and in fact, we're encouraging it in the NACs in a particular area of the NAC.
Right. It is cloudy at its best.
But 71.12 specifically says that we're encouraging lands zoned R5 to be dispersed throughout the community, and there is comp plan policies and principles in the McMinnville Growth Management Urbanization Plan that speaks to dispersal of housing types throughout the community. So,
Remy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is kind of a tack onto what Councilor Peralta said, but just in terms of if the staff report could, or following reports could come back and address a couple other concerns that we heard this evening. If staff could address for the council and the public the role of property value in this decision-making process, and the effect on any indigenous lands that are surrounding the city, and also the change in necessity. This is directly, more directly, the 72 acres of R5 that that Mr. Friedman referenced in the original document, and that only half of that is being required. If those three concerns I heard come up throughout testimony tonight, and would appreciate a staff response.
Thank you, Remy. Any other direction for staff in the coming 2 evenings?
So just to clarify, the residential land need was one of the assignments of error that the petitioners had with the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals rejected that assignment of error. Is that something we want to open up at this level?
I don't think we want to open the record up for that. Spencer, your thoughts?
Well, Mr. Mayor, when we first came back to the council staff and came to the council to discuss what you wanted to undertake and how far you wanted to open it up, what the direction you provided to staff was that you were limiting it to the remanded issue and no farther. And so staff is this tome of information that the council has before this evening is kind of based on that initial direction that staff received from the council. And so if the council is entertaining revisiting that question, although not required to do so by the Court of Appeals, I think it would require additional work by staff to be able to address that. So staff, based on the direction it received from the council, went forward and prepared the information that's presented to you this evening, limited to, with the instruction to limit its work to the essential issue that was remanded by the Court of Appeals and back down to LCDC and then to the city.
Thank you, Spencer. Remy?
I just want to clarify that I am not advocating towards any direction. Those were just three very specific things that I heard come up in public testimony, and I don't want to presume whether or not I think I have the answers to them. I don't want to be presumptive in that way. And since they came up in public comment, it seemed that's my request, is just that staff address those things for why they are not included in this overall document. I'm just looking for the clarity to be in the record and coming from our expert staff.
So we will bring back to you the why there are 36 acres of R5 land in the record for the expanded UGB proposal.
Thank you, Heather. Kelly?
Just as a comment, I think the indigenous lands and I'm sorry, what was the other one? a lot of some of that was probably going to be addressed as we get further down the road and at the 1,000-foot level and not the 10,000-foot level. I appreciate his questions too, but we are looking at it from a fairly high level, and that's what we, as the council, decided early on.
Yeah, I kind of addressed the goal 5 cultural resources right now. There is urban myth about the mound in the West Hills South study area, and that's the hillside behind Mr. Ashcroft's house that he was talking about. It's a little mound out there in the field. That could be a old burial ground for Native American people. And so we do have that on a proposal, a future proposal as part of a Goal 5 cultural resource study to do before any development occurs there. And that's part of why that's in the comp plan policy proposal.
Thank you for the clarification, Heather. Okay, anything else from counselors for this evening? Okay, with that, this concludes our public hearing for this evening. We will continue the public hearing tomorrow evening, December 2nd at 6 o'clock. For those who testified this evening, you're welcome to join us again tomorrow and then again on December 3rd. However, as I indicated to Ramsey, everyone will only be able to testify once in these proceedings. This meeting is adjourned at 7:51 p.m. Thank you for your participation and the interest that you have in your community. Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone.